Hello again, everybody. I'm Chris Reel, Baltimore guide and owner of Rent-A-Tour. Thanks so much for watching this video, and happy Halloween. It's been a while since I've made a video, and so I thought, in keeping with the spirit of the season, I'd talk a little bit today about one of Baltimore's favorite residents, none other than Edgar Allan Poe, the master of the macabre. Now, I've talked about Poe before and his connection to Baltimore. One of the reasons that Poe's time in Baltimore is so important is because it was in Baltimore that Poe became a professional writer. He was paid for the very first time for something he'd written while he was living here in Baltimore at a house on Amity Street, a house which still stands. And Poe lived there for several years, and this is where his career really began to flourish. And some of the stories and poems that he wrote while living on Amity Street are among the most important, I think, in his entire repertoire. But they're not all that well known. Some of his more famous stories wouldn't be written until later on. However, these stories allow us to see Poe's development as a writer. He's honing his talent. He's figuring out what he's good at. And some of these stories, I think, are some of the creepiest that he ever wrote. I'd like to do today is share with you an excerpt from one of my favorite stories that Poe wrote while living in Baltimore called Berenice. Now, if you've not read Berenice, spoiler alert, I'm going to be reading the end of the story. If you'd like to read it for yourself, I highly recommend it, but stop this video right now if you don't want to know what happens. Now, Berenice is written in the first person, which is a technique that Poe would use throughout his literary career. It's a way of taking the reader inside the mind of these characters so we know what they're thinking. And this narrator is afflicted with a very peculiar ailment, something he calls monomania, which compels him to fixate on seemingly ordinary items for extended periods of time. Hours, sometimes days, spent staring at the single flame of a candle, or obsessing over one sentence in a book. Now, our narrator happens to be married to his cousin, maybe art imitating life a little bit here in Poe's case. His cousin is named Berenice, and she's a great beauty, but she has an affliction of her own, something like epilepsy that causes her to lapse into catatonic states for extended periods of time and gradually diminish her beauty. One evening, our narrator is sitting in his library chamber, and Berenice stands before him, her once great beauty now all but wasted away. And the way Poe describes Berenice as she stands before the narrator is absolutely chilling. He describes her face, her forehead, her hair, but he pays particular attention to her teeth, the white teeth of Berenice. Well, because of his monomania, the narrator now fixates on the white teeth of Berenice. Long after she leaves his chamber, he sits there, and days go by as he thinks about her teeth. It's all he can think about. And eventually, Berenice dies, and she's buried. This portion of the story picks up shortly after the burial of Berenice. I found myself sitting in the library, and again sitting there alone. It seemed that I had newly awakened from a confused and exciting dream. I knew that it was now midnight, and I was well aware that since the setting of the sun, Berenice had been interred. But of that dreary period which intervened, I had no positive, at least no definite, comprehension. Yet its memory was replete with horror. Horror more horrible from being vague, and terror more terrible from ambiguity. It was a fearful page in the record of my existence, written all over with dim and hideous and unintelligible recollections. I strived to decipher them, but in vain. While ever and anon, like the spirit of a departed sound, the shrill and piercing shriek of a female voice seemed to be ringing in my ears. I had done a deed. What was it? I asked myself the question aloud, and the whispering echoes of the chamber answered me. What was it? On the table beside me burned a lamp, and near it lay a little box. It was of no remarkable character, and I had seen it frequently before, for it was the property of the family physician. But how came it there, upon my table, and why did I shudder in regarding it? These things were in no manner to be accounted for, and my eyes at length dropped to the open pages of a book, and to a sentence underscored therein. The words were the singular but simple ones of the poet Ibn Zayat. Dicebant mihi sodalis, si sepulchrum amicae visitarum, coras meas aliquantulum fore levatas. Why then, as I perused them, did the hairs of my head erect themselves on end, and the blood of my body become congealed within my veins? There came a light tap at the library door, and pale as the tenant of a tomb, a menial entered upon tiptoe. His looks were wild with terror, and he spoke to me in a voice tremulous, husky, and very low. What said he? Some broken sentences I heard. He told of a wild cry disturbing the silence of the night, of the gathering together of the household, of a search in the direction of the sound. And then his tones grew thrillingly distinct as he whispered me of a violated grave, of a disfigured body enshrouded, yet still breathing, still palpitating, still alive. He pointed to my garments. They were muddy and clotted with gore. I spoke not, and he took me gently by the hand. It was indented with the impress of human nails. He directed my attention to some object against the wall. I looked at it for some minutes. It was a spade. With a shriek I bounded to the table and grasped the box that lay upon it, but I could not force it open, and in my tremor it slipped from my hands and fell heavily and burst into pieces, and from it, with a rattling sound, there rolled out some instruments of dental surgery, intermingled with 32 small, white, and ivory-looking substances that were scattered to and fro about the floor. Berenice, by Edgar Allan Poe, written in Baltimore and published in 1835. And if you'd like to learn more about Edgar Allan Poe and the Poe House on Amity Street, I encourage you to visit www.poebaltimore.org, the homepage for the Poe Baltimore organization that's responsible for maintaining the Poe House and telling Poe's Baltimore story to all who are interested. You can also visit Poe's grave in West Baltimore at the corner of Fayette and Green Streets. And for more information about virtual tours and in-person tours in Baltimore, please visit www.rentator.com. Thanks so much for watching this video. Please like, please share, and if you have an idea for another Baltimore story, please let me know in the comments. Until next time, take care of each other, be safe, happy Halloween, and I'll see you soon.